The example of Scotch Ellen seemed contagious, for just as we were ready to start, a train of three large Chihuahua wagons came in sight around the bend of the road by the Obispado, preceded by a horsewoman who all recognized as Sarah Borginnis, the Great Western. The heroine rode up to Colonel Washington and asked permission to accompany the expedition. The colonel referred her to Major Rucker, who informed her that if she would marry one of the dragoons and be mustered in as a laundress, she could go. Her ladyship gave the military salute and replied, "All right, Major, I'll marry the whole squadron and you thrown in, but what I go along." Riding along the front of the line, she cried out, "Who wants a wife with $15,000 and the biggest leg in Mexico? Come, my beauties, don't speak all at once. Who's the lucky man?" Whether the thought of such a trifle as the fact that the Great Western had one husband in the Sixth Infantry and another in Harney's Dragoons made the men hesitate, I know not, but at first no one seemed to be disposed to accept the brilliant offer until Davis of Company E, the same that flogged Doherty, said, "I have no objections to make you my wife if there was a clergyman to tie the knot all right." With a laugh, the heroine replied, "Bring your blankets to my tent tonight, and I will learn you to tie a knot that will satisfy you, I reckon." Such was the morals of the army in Mexico. Mrs. Davis, née Borginnis, was on E Company books as laundress and drew rations as such. Mrs. Davis was, though somewhat large, exuberant, and truculent when wroth. While pleased, she was as fine a figure as those who like things rosy, ripe, and succulent would wish to look upon while they are in vigor. She could repay each amatory look you lent with interest, and in turn was wont with rigor to exact of Cupid bills the full amount at sight, nor would permit you to discount.
Hi, JVH.
Hi, Candy.
How you doing? Welcome back.
It's been a while.
It's been a while.
Been a
Um,
minute.
it's been a minute for sure. How is your summer or your quiet time going in your life? I know it's not that quiet.
No. Yeah, it's very, very busy, but the weather has gotten less hot and so it's very beautiful out.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's
You know,
true. Boy,
South
that was
Ontario.
torture. Some of that weather was just like a nightmare. Absolute nightmare.
How have
Well,
you been?
I've been okay. As you know, I injured my back, but I'm on the mend, so I'm taking it easy. And actually, this is a great distraction from focusing on pain. Um,
Rise above.
I am, and also, yes, rise above. Also, I've been, probably in another 2 or 3 weeks, I will not be watching TV anymore for a while. I've gone to the end of Netflix. I've gone to the end of Amazon Prime. I've seen them all. I found all kinds of esoteric stuff on Disney.
Oh, wow. Have you seen any good movies?
I
Have
have.
you seen?
I've watched it twice. I loved it so much. I love Disclosure Day. I
Oh,
just
okay.
thought it was
Yeah.
absolutely fantastic. A great evolution from E.T. to
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
Close Encounters to the new one. I saw Toy Story 5. It was wonderful. I mean, and I kind of binged the earlier ones just to kind of catch up in anticipation. And it was just a really wonderful story and very good, very good.
Yeah.
We have some other news. We're going to be we put a proposal, an abstract into the Knoxville Cormac McCarthy conference, and we are accepted, and we're going to be there. We're going to present there, and so I'm pretty excited about that. And we're going to talk about our tarot cards, which is a good reminder. I'm just going to take a segue right now. If you would like a deck of tarot cards, if you're in Canada, please reach out to us. You can do it on Substack, or our email address is bloodmeridiannow. What is
At
our
gmail.com.
Thank you, because I was like, does it say 1985 or no? No, it just says bloodmeridiannow@gmail.com. Okay, so you could email us there, and then we'll exchange the deets and mail them out to you. What else
I
do we
was
need?
just looking at the deck today, actually.
You were
It's so good. Yeah.
good, good. This might come up in a few minutes, but I was able to see Dennis McCarthy. in on my road trip, and I don't think I mentioned this last time we were talking on our archive episodes, but he's got a deck now, and he was quite curious and he was quite interested, and he was kind of blown away. He
Yes.
really couldn't believe that, there were so many cards. He didn't know a lot about tarot, and then he was really concerned, where are the originals? And I said, well, they're at home in our apartment. And he was like, what? And then he wanted to know how big they were and everything. So it was really, really kind of cool. And I, thought you would like that.
Yeah, I mean, you take a look at these cards, and every single card is really quite incredible. And just, you can spend like a long time just contemplating every single card, which was what one of my friends did when I went to
Oh,
visit him in Manitoulin. I brought him a deck, and I didn't expect him to look right away,
right, right,
but
right,
it took like an hour, and I just sat there in silence as he like went one card after the other, and
right.
he was blown away. He was very impressed.
Oh, good. Well, it was very similar with Dennis too. And the thing is, it's the second time it's happened to me as well, where somebody my stepmom wanted to look at each card. And then Dennis was asking me about the cards. I was like, I was not prepared for it at all, but I mean, we swung with it. I mean, we did it. But I was like, oh my God, it was so intense. Yeah, it was funny. It was like a good hour, hour and a half. And yeah. So that's cool.
I was especially looking at the chariot card. I forgot to tell you this actually.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because for a couple of reasons, because of the sort of manifest destiny, uh, a feminine figure
Mhm,
on the
mhm.
card,
Yeah.
but also because it's the chariot, it's the cart, and so we in this very, very brief, the shortest of all the chapters in the novel, and perhaps because of its brevity, maybe we think that it's the least
Mm,
important or least interesting. But this, in this chapter, we both have a kind of thematization of womanliness or the feminine or something like that, and as well, there's the cart. Like
mhm,
there's the idiot's cart that gets burned up by Sarah Borginnis and the other laundresses. But and we have this figure of the tumbril burned in the chapter subheading. So yeah, it'd be great to talk about
yeah,
this. Like I think we were probably worried a little bit. Oh, this is like three
yeah,
pages
yeah,
long. So
yeah.
how are we gonna have anything to talk about? But of course,
Between you and I, as my friend Eugene his father would say, Candy, you can talk to a tombstone. So I feel like both of us could do that once we get going. And I
yeah,
think that, yeah, I think that some of these ideas around feminization and the astrology in here, I think we've got a lot to work with. How about if we mentioned that the opening reading today was from Chamberlain's My Confession, which
that's right.
we normally read from Blood Meridian, which we're going to do maybe right now. You have a little section you want to start that, and then we'll get into our discussion.
Yeah, that was Samuel Chamberlain's kind of first longer impression of Sarah Borginnis in his memoir. And I don't know if you could hear it, dear listener, but this first passage ends with a poem to
Mm.
Sarah Borginnis, which is, really awkwardly, it's very awkward rhythmically speaking, and not very well put together, but anyways, it's interesting.
It is. Maybe he fancied her. She must have been quite a figure.
Yeah, and so I think he meets. I think when the passage that I read, I think they're probably in Saltillo, Mexico, where Sarah Borginnis had established a hotel slash restaurant slash brothel
Mhm.
called the American. Um,
Of course it was.
we don't go to Saltillo and Blood Meridian at all, but it's mentioned a few times. Like there are
Mhm,
Saltillo
mhm,
blankets and blah blah
mhm,
blah.
mhm,
Um, but right now, of course, this is chapter 18, right? So we
mhm.
have I don't I feel like I made a mistake the last time we had an episode on the
Oh,
novel. I think I might have said that the Glanton gang are like they're back in America. They have abandoned Mexico and stuff like that. I think I was wrong. I'm
Okay.
pretty sure. Like again, I'm pretty sure, but don't quote me on this or do your own research. But
Mhm.
I think when they arrive at the Yuma ferry crossing, this is first of all before there was an American fort in the area. Fort Yuma didn't exist until after the Glanton Gang massacre, after they were
Mm,
massacred.
mm,
But they're on basically kind of like the border between Mexico and America in, the yet to be annexed part of the southern tip of Arizona or
mhm,
something like that. So they're as about as north in Mexico as they can get. So
mm.
so they are still in Mexico, and
Okay.
I feel like it is fitting, narratively speaking, and obviously it's a historical fact that Glanton dies in Mexico. Anyways, but that's next chapter. This is
Okay.
chapter 18,
Yeah.
and they have arrived at the Yuma Ferry crossing, which is like it's there are a bunch of camps around, I think. This Dr. A.L. Lincoln, who had gone to California to look for gold, came back to Yuma after being unsuccessful, and then he established this ferry crossing, right? So the gang is sort of like they're almost like settling down or something like that.
Mm,
Like
mm,
they're sort of stagnating in Yuma. So this chapter, there is no real action, right? Like
mm,
nothing really massively significant to the fate of the gang. Certainly nothing
mm,
significant to the fate of the gang really happens.
mhm,
So again, it kind of seems like a nothing chapter. The action is static. It's incredibly short. Like, what is the point even of putting this chapter in? And we'll
mm.
get to this more, but I think maybe if we read the first two paragraphs of the chapter, we can start
Sounds good.
getting into things. So we read that when they rode out of the Yuma camp, it was in the dark of the early morning. Cancer, Virgo, Leo raced the ecliptic down the southern night, and to the north the constellation of Cassiopeia burned like a witch's signature on the black face of the firmament. In the night-long parley, they'd come to terms with the Yumas in conspiring to seize the ferry. They rode upriver among the flood-stained trees, talking quietly among themselves like men returning late from a social, from a wedding, or a death. By daylight, the women at the crossing had discovered the idiot in his cage. They gathered about him, apparently unappalled by the nakedness and filth. They crooned to him, and they consulted among themselves, and a woman named Sarah Borginnis led them to seek out the brother. She was a huge woman with a great red face, and she read him riot. So we could start with, like this is a chapter where, for whatever reason, and again, it's kind of like why? We have this kind of like figure of Sarah Borginnis, maybe the only female figure in the novel that is given a name.
Mhm. I
Like,
don't think
seriously, I really don't think
I don't think so either.
the
And
mother doesn't
the
have a
sex
name,
worker at the end of the novel, I don't believe she has a name. That's the one that did occur to me. That's the second most developed female character, not developed at all.
and the tavern keeper's wife who
Oh
takes care
yeah.
of the kid,
Mhm.
after he gets shot, she doesn't have a
Right.
name.
No, that's right.
Like, so we have the named woman in
Yeah.
the novel contained to this tiny little chapter, and in some ways, like I don't know, it's almost like she's being poked fun of, right? Because
Mhm.
she tries to redeem or deliver James Robert Bell, aka the idiot or the imbecile, all these kind of like nasty words that the narrative uses to
Mhm.
to uh, to name him.
Mhm.
So she tries to sort of like rehabilitate him from his squalor, but basically she fails, right?
Right,
So
because she washes him off and gets him some new clothes. He sits around the fire with everyone, and when everyone's asleep, he goes back into the water. Something you
only to
described.
be, he would have drowned,
Oh, he would
right?
have drowned for sure. For sure.
And again, it's a very funny sort of line, right?
Yeah.
Like, what is it? Now the judge on his midnight rounds was passing along at just this place, stark naked himself, And then there's a dash. Such encounters being commoner than men suppose, or who would survive any crossing by night? And then
Right,
dash.
right.
And he stepped into the river and seized up the drowning idiot, snatching it aloft by the heels like a great midwife and slapping it on the back to let the water out. So, like,
Mm-hmm,
in the
mm-hmm.
end, sort of the judge rescues the idiot from Sarah Borginnis's attempt to improve him.
Mm-hmm. Possibly to improve him, definitely. And she gives him a baptism of some kind because part of that whole healing that she gives to him and cleaning up, in born again, there's a great belief in actual baptism. I've seen baptisms happen down in Lake Chicago, Lake Michigan here in Chicago, where a church will take people down and put them in the lake.
Right.
And yeah, so it's really it is insulting. It is insulting. It also is, it's partly naive. I found that in the same year as 1850, because now we're in 1850, in 1849, a fellow did write a book about, um, his name was Edward Seguin, was a Frenchman who worked with Jean-Marc Gaspard. Itard, who had discovered and educated Victor, the wild boy of Avalon, in France. Seguin learned about moral treatment for the insane and opened a school for mentally disabled children in 1839. Seguin moved to the United States in 1849. From 1839, but he moved into the States in 1849. And this came from the Disability History Museum site. I just thought that was really interesting that it was in that year that were more or less that it's possible Borganis heard about this
Right.
and had, this reaching out and very Christian idea to treat everyone the same. Nothing wrong with it at all. But definitely McCarthy does show this idealism with cleaning him up, giving him a bath, putting him in the river, when this poor child, this man child, really is he loved the river. It probably felt wonderful. And of course, in his naive state of mind, he wasn't able to logic that you can't swim. Doesn't even probably know what swimming is. So I thought that was pretty cool that she gives him a birth, but the judge gives him another birth.
The
And
birth and curse, to quote St. Vincent.
there you go. And oh, right. Um,
I saw St. Vincent,
I
dear listener.
know that's so great. I'm I'm
I-
I'm jelly. I want to see her. And what were you saying about this? Yeah, this is fantastic. It's this idealism, but I was worried because the judge is out naked. It's a child. He's in a man's body. Maybe he only didn't get killed and raped by the judge because physically he wasn't a child. He was a man. I mean, it's so creepy because it's like in the past we know we could have been just killed this guy, James Robert, the handicapped fellow. And
Right.
you noted quite cleverly about the burning of there's foretelling of the tarot card reads that Glanton's going to die by or his end might be coming by chariot. And here we have a cage on wheels. Can you tell me about the word tumbler? Or how do you say
Yeah, we
it?
can. Yeah, we can definitely talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah, tumbril. Maybe not
Well,
right now, but
yeah. One of the chapter subheadings is. Well, I kind of want to talk about the first one too, the
yeah, go
return.
for it.
Um, I guess I like this is chapter 18. This is kind of the one chapter, like in the past when we looked at chapter 2 and 3 and maybe 4, I can't
Mm,
remember, but
mm,
we had this kind of like, oh, there's sort of a theme, like, like chapter 2 was kind of obsessed with slavery or something and the legacy of slavery, right? Like you begin with the slaver and you end with the three slaves watching the washing the coach or something like that. And then
mm,
the next chapter is sort of like framed around whiteness. We
right.
got Captain White, but his horse is white with white, paws and or sorry, stuff like that.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Hooves,
here
yeah.
I really do think like and maybe we can try to figure this out or whatever or start to talk about it why chapter 18 is kind of like, this is where the feminine, at least in the form of woman, like
Mm, mm,
is like contained in this one little very incredibly short chapter, right? Like it even the simile that is in the first paragraph, Cassiopeia burned like a witch's signature on the black face of the firmament. That itself is sort of like showing us that this chapter is governed by the star of femininity or something like that,
Yeah.
right? Cassiopeia as as a as a mythological figure. She was, taken into heaven, but she boasted that she was fairer than other constellations or something like that. And for that reason, she was bound to her chair and
Mm,
condemned to circle the pole head downwards as a lesson in humility.
mhm,
Okay, so we got this, first of all, it's like the hanged man in the
mhm,
tarot deck, except it's a woman,
mm,
an upside down woman who is bound to a chair, um, you know, as a kind of lesson.
mhm,
Uh, and then we have this again, Cassiopeia burned like a witch's signature. So it's like this sort of redundancy, compounding of images of the feminine are associated. But a witch's signature, is really interesting. It's like a sort of a thing from the Puritan witch trials, right? Like when, probably maybe even before the Puritan
right, right,
century. But this it was thought that witches, of course, and witches were women, had marks on their body that would give their satanic essence away or something like that. So
mhm,
of course this
mhm,
allowed law enforcement to intrusively search women's bodies and stuff like that. So like Cassiopeia is already kind of a humiliated woman figure and a witch's signature, and then we get Sarah Borginnis, which is, if you listen to the paragraph from Sam Chamberlain,
mhm,
um, exuberant, truculent, but also, she is like, she contains multitudes. This is a really complicated historical figure
mhm,
that we could talk about a lot. And one thing that you and I both noticed when reading is that, this is 1849 or 1850,
mhm.
right?
Yeah, I
This is
think we're in 1850 now. Yeah.
1850 now. We're at the Yuma ferry crossing before Fort Yuma is. Again, I feel like I should have fact checked myself, but I think it's before Fort Yuma was established.
Mm-hmm.
Sarah Borginnis is not in Yuma in 1850 in the historical record.
Mm-hmm.
She moves to Fort Yuma with her, with a husband named Albert Bowman in like 1852 or
Mm-hmm.
1853. And
Mm-hmm.
she's like the first woman, like resident of Yuma or of Arizona, like, so she has these kind of like, she was the first woman to settle in this area or something like that. Or I
Mm-hmm.
guess, obviously, American woman.
Mm-hmm.
So this is an anachronism, right? Like Sarah
Absolutely.
Borges' presence in this novel, it should not be because she's nowhere. The novel, they don't go to Saltillo,
Right,
so they don't
right,
see me there.
right.
But McCarthy places her here anachronistically
Yeah.
and places her in chapter 18, in this like 3, 4 page chapter. And, given that she was like, polyamorous, I guess you could say in contemporary parlance,
Yeah.
like she married for convenience and she was basically independent. She was a businesswoman. She owned hotels, she had all sorts of ventures. She protected like orphans and Mexican girls and gave them work, albeit
Mm-hmm.
maybe, in a brothel or something like
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
sometimes,
Right.
laundresses, working laundry and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, sh an incredible historical figure, very complicated, super colorful, like,
Yeah.
great, people remember very funny things she said. But in here, in Blood Meridian, she is this like temperance, prohibition, moralizing, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah, that's
she
so interesting. That's
none of,
so
none
true.
of the characteristics of Sarah Borginnis, except for, she's a huge woman with a great red face.
Right.
Like yeah, she was a redhead and she was tall, right? Like
Yeah.
probably 6'2", although some men thought, probably who were short, thought she was 7 feet tall or
Right.
something like that.
Right.
So she's
Well,
sort of like the judge, like this
absolutely.
crazy extreme figure, like that can't be explained. But in this chapter, she's constrained. Like, you know what I
Well,
mean?
interesting because I think you've kind of answered the question of why this is so short. Certainly, having a short chapter in this novel gives beautiful pacing, lets you take a break. It shows the pacing.
Yes.
And I've
Yes.
counted the synoptic chapter titles and put a list. And I've got a spreadsheet on Blood Meridian, right? And it has the synoptic chapter titles counted. It has the astrological signs when they show up, the dates, the tarot cards and motifs that are on this spreadsheet. And you can see a beautiful pacing of the pattern of the novel through these titles when you see the numbers. It's very nicely spaced out. But I think how you answered your own question is we may not even have noticed her if she had been in one of those very convoluted chapters we've read before. In some way, it's extremely condensed and highlighted that she's in this novel in such a short few pages, 5 or 6 pages, as you said, maybe four. And she's called the Borginnis, as you said also, and we call him the judge. And she speaks back to the gang. I mean, how many people have stood up to the gang? Whether we like it or not, or whether she's right to clean this young man up, which I think she is right to clean him up, is that you've got to do full care. You can't just clean him up and assume now he's going to be not drowning. You've got the vigilance. The reason he was in a cage is because he will wander away. It wasn't just because they were being sadistic. So they didn't know how. You could call it a playpen, which would be a rebranding of it less offensive than a cage, or a cartoza, or chariot wheels, a cage on wheels. Um, it's a little bit both. They're both extreme. The judge in his treatment and her. The judge wants him, I think, because he's a freak, and he's got his own band of freaks in Glanton's gang. Uh, there's something you mentioned when you said the chariot card. We have that female figure dressed in the American flag on it that Stagg so joyously took from Ralph Bashki. But
Oh
it
yeah.
also, and you mentioned Manifest Destiny, in some ways, Sarah Borganis kind of looks like the woman in the painting of Manifest Destiny, American Progress or whatever. And I
Right.
also was reminded that you said something was originally titled American, and I've lost track of what it was that you said, but the original name for Citizen Kane was American. And which both stories and Blood Meridian and Citizen Kane are about end of childhood and coping with if you don't cope with the wounds of end of childhood, or end of childhood being a major part of the plot or character development. Yeah. I don't know where else I was going with that. The anachronism. So yeah, we're able to focus on her on such a short chapter. This is our third anachronism in the novel that we've talked about. We did not mention Coke. McCarthy has Coke in at least 20 to 25 times throughout his body of work, especially from Sutrion. It's always mentioned. And even in Blood Meridian, he found a way to have the word Coke in there with a historical character called Coke. So that's two anachronisms. The third one is our tarot card. Um, I have a theory. I just want to address this before I forget. My theory, probably my overall argument for the number 117 is it comes from Sonnet 117 for Shakespeare. And it's these lines here. Book both my willfulness and errors down, and on just proofs surmise accumulate. So for me, that's why he uses the number 117 because he has errors in his book. And this guy, do you write this novel and make mistakes like that accidentally? I don't believe so, and I believe his editor wouldn't have put them in there either. I think why he has Sarah there in 1850, I don't know. It fits his novel. It's good that he puts her in there. It does make a female character, and he's juxtaposed it with what you bring up, is that she has this idealistic, hopeful attitude towards reconstituting or rehabilitating this disability, this intellectual disability of James Robert. And you made a good point in our notes of bringing up a famous quote of Cormac's.
That's right. Yeah. It does seem kind of like a way in which McCarthy could dramatically present his idea that there is no um, life without bloodshed,
Hmm.
and his idea that he thinks that, this is from that famous, was it Richard Woodward or something?
Yeah, maybe New York Times interview.
I think the notion that the species can be improved in some way, that everyone could live in harmony, is a really dangerous idea. And
Mm,
those who are afflicted with this notion are the first to give up their souls. Your desire that it be that way will enslave you and make your life vacuous. So, I mean, if you juxtapose that quotation
mm,
with the way Sarah Borginnis's actions are sort of like their consequences, which are basically vacuous, right? Like
mm,
she tried to do this and it didn't work. So her
mhm, mhm,
desire to improve James Robert was proven vacuous by the
mhm,
narrative. So
mhm.
it's um, yeah, I mean, I think we've talked about this too, like you and I, like that, it's a kind of we should approach this dialectically, right? Like
Yeah.
in some way, the judge's restoration of James Robert to the gang is in keeping with James Robert's nature, like it's not in, or it's not James Robert. I don't, do you know what I mean? Like, I mean, it's
Yeah, I feel they've accepted him.
the narrative basically says, by what happens that Sarah Borginnis was wrong to do this,
Yeah,
that it was, or that it
or
was
or
pointless,
deluded.
it's
Yeah,
pointless,
pointless. There you go.
and that,
Futile.
in some way, being with the Glanton gang allowed James Robert to be the best James Robert he could be, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think that there's something else that's really interesting here about her tone with the gang and with her cleanliness and wanting to kind of fix him up and the way she talks to him is that this is, if we've worked so hard to have people have diversity and equality. You know how you can tell if someone's really actually not a sexist asshole is that they really don't judge women for being domestic and they don't hate domesticity. Domesticity comes up in his novels a lot, but there's a real hatred here, a resentment. This is like a caricature of that kind of, like you said, temperance or cleanliness is next to godliness. It's such a joke that, that her failure is amplified in a tiny, tiny chapter that we can't think about anything else. That's why I said I think you've answered your own question. It's a microscope on her and on that storyline, on that simple narrative plot. And the thing is, we do know that when you have cleanliness and you have good, better nutrition, not just this mindless food that we eat in our society. There's a whole movie called Super Size Me about how bad like our food is. You're not improving yourself. You see, I think fast food is trying to improve on us. I would say that's a good example of trying to improve on our species, is that we really are meant to not even eat bread. We're meant to hunt and gather and eat berries and seafood and animals, right? And go out and get them free. We've locked them up. We've tried to improve our species. Oh, let's put it in the fridge. Let's build so much food reserves that we have overpopulation. Overpopulation doesn't happen from sex. Happens from having too much food. We have so much food and we don't even distribute it properly. Um, so there is like a chain event of having this symbolism of her in there. And you made such a good point of reminding me about that quote. And I thought of it when I read the chapter last week too, the other day, about that improvement thing. For me, the improvement in that quote would really have to do with um, trying to make us like robots or post-human on purpose. We're going to be post-human probably by accident, but to try and improve us by breeding like Nazis. To me, eugenics or breeding or killing handicapped people would be a form of improving the species. So I wish
Oh, of
that I
course, yeah, of
yeah,
course.
of a theory of it, not true. I meant of an evil interpretation of it. That's why the quote is so disturbing, because it's
Yeah,
disturbing and true. But the thing is, he's saying don't do that, right? He's saying don't use eugenics, don't use brain measuring the brain, how big brain people are smarter. So he's on the right track that way. He just left it so freaking vague for people, and saying that we're vacuous if we do something. I mean, I think you should eat good and well food and have some activity in life. I've kind of gone on a tangent here. I'm sorry, because you've got such good point there, and I don't want to lose it.
I don't really know what the point was, but I mean,
Hopefully our listeners are following. I know they are.
you remind me of what the point was.
Yeah.
Well, like when you read, like, I had when I taught Blood Meridian in a fourth year seminar last winter, and I had them read a 1989 essay by somebody named J.F. Elliott on Sarah Borginnis slash Bowman slash whatever, called Mother and Mistress to the U.S. Army, where it gives a lot of the facts of Sarah's life. And uh, it's just that, I find the way Sarah Borginnis appears in Blood Meridian is a kind of a good example of McCarthy's sort of like allegorical method. Like this
Hmm.
is a very abstract novel once
Hmm.
you kind of start thinking about it. It seems like deeply realistic,
Hmm.
but I've been reading a novel called Fearless, uh, which is basically a fictionalization of Sarah Borginnis's life.
Hmm.
Uh, by Lucia St. Clair Robson. So it's an excellent novel. It's like
Hmm.
so good, but it's so realistic about what it was like to be like just like camp life, for example.
Yeah.
Like the gang is camped with a whole bunch of other like travelers who are either going to the gold
Hmm.
fields or
Hmm.
coming from the gold fields or like the Yumas are also camped nearby. So like it's a totally motley, like crazy, complicated thing, but we don't get any of that because like the narrative is so abstract and
Hmm.
allegorical.
Hmm.
Sarah Borginnis is like you know, how she appears is like maybe a 100 millionth of what she was kind of appears very briefly in a kind of a very curated sliver of
Hmm.
what she was. I feel like I'm babbling or something like that, but
No, no, and I think it fits in with the anachronism too. I think it shows that he knows what he's doing. It's it for better or for worse. Do I think he wants to insult her? No, no. I think maybe he's having fun with the historical character. And as I say, I want to go back to that error making. Is it because she shouldn't be there, it that also draws attention to us. The Coke should not be in. There was no Coke in 1849. McCarthy found a way to do it. The tarot cards weren't invented that he uses in that book, were not invented then. Um, oh no, I don't want to cough. Um, about this and this book, My Errors, that I read from Sonnet 117, reminds me of something that I don't even know if I mentioned it because of the pain I'm in. When I had written an email to a bunch of us that know each other from conferences or the forum, I had sent out an email talking about astrology and the tarot cards, and Diane Luce wrote back, and I said that Cormac, I'd been told, as I just said now, that Cormac was really into astrology. His brother told me that when we were looking at the tarot cards because I was talking to him about the representation of astrology in the tarot cards. And I said, "Oh, I know he is, but I am so glad you just confirmed that to me, right?" I didn't say this so far in the podcast yet, right? Or did I?
no, I don't think so.
I didn't either. So sorry, listeners. I have a little bit of pain, so I kind of get distracted. But Diane Luce emailed back and said that she had talked to Annie about him being into astrology. And when she met Annie, his second wife, she wanted to know right away what Diane's sign was. And I mean, that's a funny story. And then she said that when Cormac first wrote um Suttree, he had 12 characters and he knew all their astrology signs, and he was going to put that into the novel. But he didn't, obviously, because we don't know of it unless it's subtle and someone goes into the novel and tracks that down, which I think would be an amazing essay. Side note, if you're looking for a project or a paper or a dissertation, try and see if there's astrology signs in the characters of the personalities of the people in the novel. However, so she writes this and she said, but she could not find any evidence, written evidence of this in the archives, which I didn't write back
Right.
to Diane. Huh?
No. Yeah, no,
Yeah,
no, go on.
There was nothing of it that there was an original thing where the characters had astrological signs kept in the archives. And for me, there's no fucking way you would ever keep that or put it into the archives. In the same way that I think I was talking about the character being built from the parasocial correspondence of somebody, the formaldehyde kid was built on these letters that were written to Cormac. He took all the dialogue, but he did not put that in the archives. And I knew he wouldn't. And so I do wanted to address that if you're doing this practice of occult, or, and by occult I mean hidden, but of sprezzatura or hidden architecture or secret architecture and numerical composition, you don't record it. You would not share that with it. You'll share everything else, but you're not going to share that. That's magic. Even when I talked to the archivist, I talked to her about these letters and I said, yeah, I was hoping to find them, but I had a feeling they would have been destroyed. And she said, oh no, you burn that magic. That's something, that's a ritual. You burn that. And that is so Burroughs to do that. That would be a very Burroughs thing to do, is you get rid of where your source of magic was. And you want the reader to find it on their own. And this kind of errors for me. So when I see an error in his work, it's like another message to me, that a code that he sent me. Like I'm that crazy, you know? I remember when No Country for Old Men came out, so many readers completely freaked out because he said the execution at Huntsville. And and they were like, "Oh, it's just, how could he make this mistake?" And I was like, "Well, he mentions the word hunting or hunt 13 times in the novel. That meant something to me. 13 is a very powerful number. I feel like he wanted to do it to use the word hunt, and Huntsville is such a great word, and that they killed somebody. He was linking that kind of execution to hunting. To me, that was thematically very valid. Um, in the movie The Game, there's a line where Michael Douglas is going to sign up for this improvement. Speaking of improvement, he's going to go and do this game where it helps you become a better person. And when he's filling it out, he notices the word dissatisfaction and he criticizes the form, the paper he's filling out. And then the guy doing the interview goes, "Oh, yeah, that's right. You're a left brain word fetishist." And the thing is, this brings about the part about you're mentioning history and the historical context, and then these anachronisms. Historical correctness is actually a myth. And I would put that under the left brain word fetishist, that there's people out there, they only like Martin Scorsese films because they're realistic. Well, they're not realistic. Yes, the blood looks realistic, but there's almost nothing in art that is realistic. It is all completely an illusion, right? An anachronism in art, I do have a point here. I'm trying to get and I don't mean to take up your conversation
No,
because
no,
you've got
this
so
is an
much stuff there.
important thing.
But an anachronism is something that happens in art. And sometimes anachronism, Shakespeare used it all the time. And we certainly know, and I certainly know, I've been told that McCarthy wanted to be the next as good as a writer as Shakespeare. I think he accomplished it. And certainly, so anachronism is all the time in Shakespeare. Ben Jonson, when they did Masks, he got Inigo Jones, who was a great theater producer and artist and cultural Elizabethan philosophy in the Renaissance. He brought hundreds of years of European history and art into 2 days of a mask. And it was this way of educating people, bringing all this information in a way that you didn't know you were learning, okay? And it was totally anachronistic. It was over hundreds of years. Costumes being wrong in Shakespeare, or is they aren't in Greece. They're in Shakespeare's clothing. And that can be a way of making the audience feel more comfortable with a difficult topic. So that realism, the sense of realism and historical correctness helps us suspend our disbelief, but having an anachronism also helps us jar awake our belief. There's a many reasons. It also going to be a way of resisting a historical colonialism to have anachronism, which I want to credit McCarthy with that. It should be recognized that that's a very honorable thing to do. Usually it's just marginal people who would be doing that. And he is definitely a very gifted, privileged person and very lucky man. But you're going to find nonlinear narratives in this kind of anachronism, and sometimes in marginalized women, gay, people of color doing that in their art and film.
Mm.
Um, Just want to see what else I have here. Oh yeah, so I would call them history gatekeepers too. Like it's just really like it's so dated. It's really not the way to read art and literature is to worry about if something was a wrong. It's often there for fun. So the act of history itself is an anachronism because it's coming from whoever's telling you that, which we're going to get to by the end of this novel anyway. That it's one of the messages has got something to do with it. We're dependent on word meanings. So anachronism only in history and correctness would only have to do if we agree on our word meanings. New facts come about, societal change happens. We want to resist social constructs is another way to use anachronisms. And all art is time-based. A painting is one microsecond of time it's captured. A movie film it literally uses 24 frames per second. That's how time-based and time relevant it is. Chaco Canyon, the great building in New Mexico, and Stonehenge, completely time fact. Bless you. They are completely time factoring and time-based artworks, you know? And it's really a huge part of art making. And that anachronism also brings attention to it. I could probably think of other things. Um, oh, anti-state sponsored art. It's another anachronism can resist can be an anti-state because you're pushing against a system that believes in that left brain word fetish, in that mind, that intellectual person that wants to explain art and you've got people who go and they're like, oh, I can't explain this, and they approach only academically, you know. It would be like if I only approach things as an artist. I've got to use also critical thinking, and I've got to find a way to prove my point. And if I'm making art, I've got to go and find the background, even if I throw it out. I want to be able to say, oh, I threw that out. Anyway, I just wanted to say that because we're talking about anachronisms and we've come up with them before. And I really wanted to say that it's actually a part of art history. It's a part of art making. And it's not that Cormac's making a huge mistake. Maybe Ridley Scott and the Counselor with the mountains in Chicago, that was a mistake. But I did not it didn't bother me at all. In fact, I don't think I noticed it until I went online and somebody was, people were complaining about it. I've watched that movie maybe 40 times and it still doesn't bother me. But that was probably a mistake.
Ridley Scott does not seem super rigorous.
Maybe not. Maybe not because he's telling mythologies. That's the other part. We should be laughing about this because it's really a mythological reading it, as you say, allegorical. So we should be laughing about these things. Um, yeah. What do you think about Nell and Sarah Borginnis? I know you're pretty experienced with her theories. She's got the dead girlfriend theory, the what I call fridging in the comic book world, where
Well,
moving
yeah,
forward a plot with a girl dies and you move forward the plot in comic books.
I mean, if you look at the way the chapter sort of flows from beginning to
Mm,
end, you
mm,
you kind of have this intrusion of a woman figure with a name for the first time in the
mm,
novel.
mm,
And then, she does something, she tries in a way to kind of like pull somebody out of the gang or whatever, as it
mm,
were.
mhm,
And in the end, like the judge is feminized in this simile of like a great midwife, right? So
yeah.
like that did make me think of um, yeah, our friend and colleague Nell Sullivan's essay on the Border trilogy
Mm,
and the gender trouble in the Border trilogy, where she sort of writes like women exist in the Border trilogy to be contained or otherwise, uh, evacuated from the narrative, right? Like
yeah.
that's the narrative misogyny in the text. And so we get this kind of, well, like it literally plays out in Blood Meridian. Like you could say that the feminine or something like that is contained to chapter 18. At least it's formally done so by giving Sarah Borginnis her own chapter.
Mm.
It's like contained, but also sort of like there's this kind of homoerotic or homosocial or homosexual
Yes.
fantasy of like a kind of pure circuit of male desire where there's absolutely no need of women at all, right? Because we get, like in Nell's reading of the Border trilogy, Billy sort of plays the role of the woman in a kind of circuit of pure male desire, right? You don't even really need um, Alejandra or Magdalena because
Mm,
Billy has been feminized, and so there can be created a sort of pure circuit of male desire that, you know, the a sort of paradise of bachelors, like that type of thing.
mm,
So yeah, like I mean, it plays out like dramatically and literally in this chapter where Sarah Borginnis is introduced, anachronistically,
mm,
and then in a way she disappears. She doesn't come back in the
mm,
novel.
mhm.
It doesn't meet her in Fort Yuma in 1860s or anything like that, or nothing like that, right? She comes and she goes in like 3 pages or something like that. Um, and it is pretty like I do feel like I'm not articulating it well enough, but there's this kind of like abstractive process in terms of like McCarthy is abstracting historical facts and events into a kind of dramatic structure, right? Like
Mhm,
that's what he
mhm,
kind of says
mhm.
about Blood Meridian. And there's this kind of extractive or abstractive process by which this Sarah Borginnis, who would be very disruptive if
Yes.
this is, I was kind of mentioning like I had taught this course on Blood Meridian, and I had them read this essay by J.F. Elliott on Sarah Borginnis, and I asked them, well, like, why does she just appear this way? Like she's this kind of crazy force of exuberance, like whenever you read, like
Mhm,
most of the historical record is written by men, and whenever they write about her,
mhm.
they always write about her in sexualizing terms, right? Like
Absolutely.
her nipples are sugar plums, like her, like all sorts of sort of like, she's constantly being sexualized, you know, like that's the first thing, because a woman is to be looked at, like
Mhm.
Mulvey's famous to be looked atness of woman in classic Hollywood cinema or whatever.
Yep.
So she's looked at, but she's also more than that, right? Because she's the heroine of Fort Brown. She was like serving water while, to the cannoneers, and like she was like getting shot at, and like, and basically she could do she sort of like, the way the ex-priest describes the judge in chapter 10, like
Mm,
he can do this, he can do that, he can do this and that and everything, right? Like Sarah Borginnis was like that. And I asked my students, well, why does Sarah Borginnis appear in Blood Meridian just as this kind of like
mm,
reading, sort of like a moralizing force, right? And the kind of I think have we gotten to the judge's speech where, moral law is an invention of the weak to disenfranchise the strong. Like this is what Sarah Borginnis is. She's a moralizer, right?
yeah.
And James Robert is weak, right? And
Mm,
in need of care and blah blah blah. You could look at it that way. Um, and so she's, her figure is um, treated very consciously, in a way that is not like her at all. Like,
mm.
so why do they do this? And one of my students says, well, it would kind of break the circuit of male desire in the novel if you
Beautiful.
put in Sarah Borginnis as she was, right? So they had to leave her out. And besides, the judge is kind of like the mother of the novel in a way. The judge
Mm,
is kind of like has enough feminine characteristics to him that, the rest of the novel doesn't need any women
so
except Nate.
true. I think, there's also something, that I think is not good is that what's the word? What do men don't they don't like being emasculated, right? What's the opposite of that? What would be an emasculating a woman? Like he's taken an incredible historical figure, a person with mythology and reputation, and you do a deep dive on her and you're like, she's an exceptional person. She chose to go into the military. She chose to be part of military camps. Yeah, she's probably a capitalist making money with some sex work and cooking and that. But she went where the work was. She sounds like a woman who, being 6'2" or almost 7 feet, maybe didn't fit into the city life very well, maybe was judged. She found a place she had autonomy, and he's taken that and made it like he's taken that away from her in this novel. And so I think not only is it your students the idea of breaking up that feeling of male desire, but it's also breaking up that whole like, hey, we're a boys' club, we're out here having a great time, and she comes along, and they don't want that. I really do mean that resentment towards domestic life. I mean, older men have it. Younger men generations don't tend to have that. They're more open-minded, and they've been brought up in a more equal way. But I'm thinking like even my father was fairly liberated, but I think he still would have been pissed off at like his mother telling him what to do. He still didn't like it. That there's that little 12-year-old boy trying to gain their masculinity, and they have to reject women to turn to the father. Little boys stay by the mother, and then their coming of age is to turn to the father. So I think there's something of that been manifested in there. I don't think it was probably
Yeah,
conscious. Huh?
that's something that I think a fair amount of work has been done in McCarthy, and
There you
that
go. Yeah.
sort of like flight from domesticity.
Yeah, I think Jay Ellis
Sort
did
of,
that too. Yeah. I
you
used to
know,
talk, and I used to talk about it a lot on the forum. I remember writing you a letter saying I'm going to have a novel called Dominion.
right,
I
that's
didn't I
right.
didn't write it.
But yeah, I mean, Leslie Fiedler,
Oh
has
yeah.
this idea of, American literature, at least written by men, or heterosexual men,
Mhm.
is actually sort of like a form of innocent homosexuality, innocent
Yes,
meaning not
yes, yes,
consummated or whatever.
yes, yes.
Um, So
And
yeah, like, I
uh,
mean, she appears in the novel. She doesn't have to appear because it
right.
doesn't her to appear in the timeline and where the
Mm,
gang is,
mm.
but she does appear. She appears in chapter 18. Like, you like numbers, so I'll
Yep,
just
yep,
and you just finished reading Ulysses, so I'm just
yep.
going to say, like, Ulysses is 18 chapters long. The 18th chapter is a Penelope episode where,
Mm,
Molly Bloom kind of gets her, like her voice and stuff like that. And
mm. I love it. I love
but
it.
like, yeah, like why desexualize Sarah Borginnis? Like it feels like, because she's otherwise sexualized all over the place
Yeah.
by
Mm,
by the men who remembered her, right? But
mm,
here she's desexualized.
mm,
Now, is that like is that out of respect for her? Is it something else? Does it have something to do with like feminine sexuality, like sort of intruding upon this circuit of male desire that this novel especially, because it especially has no women characters
mhm.
that this novel is trying to do. So um,
Yeah, very interesting.
it's 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 very interesting,
Certainly at the end of Shane, um, there the hero cannot stay, even though the mother and the little boy love him. He can't stay because he's dangerous. So there can't be a crossover for
Right.
the hero. I mean, these guys are anti-heroes. I mean, are they even anti-heroes? I don't even know if they're that. They are definitely there are stars of the movie.
Well, yeah,
There
they're
are
the protagonists.
protagonists. Yeah, there are protagonists, but they certainly they can't be with a woman who cares about cleanliness and but
Well, the essay by Eliot is Mother
yes.
and the U.S. Army, and in a way, Mother and Mistress are sort of like, like what Simone de Beauvoir would call the myth of the eternal feminine, right?
Mhm,
Like it's the
mhm.
virgin whore thing, which is also in Suttree, by the way, right? Like
Yes.
there is uh, Joyce, the prostitute, but
Yep.
before that, there's and Wanda,
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
daughter of Reese, right? So there's this kind of like, and maybe one of McCarthy desexualizes Sarah Borginnis, so it just makes her into a motherly figure, right?
Gosh, that's so interesting that it's such an opposite because, when I see that, the asterism of Cassiopeia is a W, right? Witch, woman, and Wanda has a W name, and is she not the witch of fuck? I mean, or the very witch of fuck, or is she the very queen of fuck? Or was that a different
Yeah,
character?
yeah.
Oh, that's
No,
Joyce. Maybe that was
but also,
Joyce.
but
But
also
what?
Joyce has a tattoo on her arm that says "Wanda, rest in peace, 1942" or something.
There you go. I've probably messed up my characters, but the stream of consciousness, it just made me think of that.
There
Uh,
might be one fleeting kind of like instance of heterosexual desire in the description of Sarah Borginnis when we have the sentence her pale hair floated on the water, which
yeah.
if you which is if you read the Border trilogy, which I've had to do against. Oh, just kidding. Love the Border trilogy.
Right.
Uh, there's Alejandra in the first sexual encounter between John Grady and Alejandra in that midnight lake. Her hair floated on the water. When
Mm,
Billy sees the prima donna in the circus,
yes.
bathing naked in the river, her hair floated on the water. So I feel like there's some kind of like thing about McCarthy had a fetish for
Oh, yeah.
hair floating in
It
water.
probably does look beautiful. I don't know because I've rarely swam with long hair, but I used to have long hair, but I bet it looks amazing.
Probably.
I'm thinking about your talking about the beginning, the invert, the W, she's upside down and her curse is that she kind of moves in a way and goes down into the horizon. There's this inversion, and I can't help but think of camera obscura. And that when we've got this, the way to paint reality for some painters was to draw, they had to draw it upside down. And it's that saying that we've said before in previous episodes, that the truth doesn't, you can't find the truth in a straight line. So there's something here about doing it wrong is going to help us find the truth in a way, or doing those errors, these mistakes and these anachronisms, they're helping us to the truth. Is there one formula I could say right now, a recipe? No. I think it comes about through experiencing these novels and experiencing, how he's written it and what's going on. It's pretty fucking amazing.
I think it was a pretty old critic, Northrop Frye.
Oh, I love him. I still love him. I know he's passé, but I do love him.
A
He's
bit past.
Canadian.
Yeah, he's Canadian.
Yeah.
I don't think he taught where I work, but
Yeah.
he was at where I work. Um,
Oh.
but he said like critics establish the meaning of words,
Mm,
and what artists, or at least literary artists, establish the power of words.
wow.
I feel like that. I feel like he said that, but you mentioned like as part of your sort of like survey of anachronisms in this novel, we have like Sarah Borginnis placed in
Yep.
the embarrassing when she shouldn't be there. We have the Rider-Waite tarot deck where
Hmm.
it shouldn't be,
Right.
and we have Coke, right? And
Yep.
but where like Coke, that's just like he's playing with that
Oh, yeah.
game, right?
Yeah.
And so his reader, he again, like it's sort of like the context of he's taking into consideration the context of the reader and evoking
Mhm.
perhaps Coca-Cola in this, but that
Yep.
that word in so yeah, I forgot one thing.
Yep.
Like with respect to, I don't know if McCarthy had a sort of like Joycean thing going on, like with chapter 18, kind of like
Mm,
resonating with Penelope or
mm,
whatever. But, like the first chapter subheading in this chapter is the return to camp, right? And the return, like in Joycean terms, would be like the Homeric nostos, right? Coming back home, the return. So we are sort of like, I don't know, returning to something
mhm, mhm.
in this kind of homecoming, the home stretch of the novel. There is a kind of returning. I feel like maybe I should try to unpack what I mean by that in
Yeah.
an episode. But the return to camp is sort of like it's maybe there is also Joycean. But speaking of this evocative power of words, this other chapter subheading where the idiot's cart is referred to as a tumbril.
Mm.
Tumbril is such a interesting word, and I absolutely love going to the OED to look at, the words and stuff like that. But tumbril is pretty cool because, like, on the one hand, it again, like, it's very it's a very good word to describe the idiot's cart because, right, the cart is like it's got a cage and it's full of poop, right?
Yep.
Like, I
Yep.
mean, but so a tumbril could be one meaning of tumbril that the OED has is that it's a farm cart
Mm,
used to carry dung. Okay, so that makes total sense
yeah.
why he would use that. Literally, very true. Tumbrils were also carts used to transport condemned prisoners to execution during the French Revolution. So
Wow.
it's kind of like a sign of death, I think. Like
Wow.
the condemned are going to die, right? And but also, which I found, maybe even more interesting, a tumbril was a device for punishment, a chair on wheels where an offender could be fastened and exposed to public ridicule. It was often called a scold cart or a cucking stool. It was a form of punishment used for women regarded as disorderly or guilty of disturbing the peace, which
Wow.
is, you could describe Sarah Borginnis as disorderly and guilty of disturbing the peace if you looked at her at the historical record, right? Like she was,
Mm,
um, you know, um, disorderly, right? Like
yeah. Yeah.
she did what she wanted, right? And
Yeah.
and all that sort of stuff. So, so I feel like this chapter is also kind of like a scold cart, like or the fact that tumbril is used, it's just like the sort of like the cloud of possible meanings around that word
Mm,
sort of diffuse into the rest of the chapter, and again kind of add to this um, thematization of the feminine.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So the cart, of course, it's referred to as a cart a couple times, a cage at least once. So it's a cart with a cage on it, right?
Yeah.
But it's constantly referred to as a cart. And it's clear from, I think, archival work, but also from the novel that the chariot, as the
Mm,
tarot card that Glanton pulls, is also referred to as a cart, right? Like the 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 tarot reader, I think she calls it like Carosa or something like that. Like it's a cart.
yeah.
Uh,
Oh, excuse me.
so
True.
the fact that the tumbril is a kind of a cart, it adds again to the imagery of the chariot in the novel, I think.
That's so true.
And even, like even we might even have a kind of evocation of the figure of the high priestess, you know.
Correct.
So like uh in astrology, the constellation of Cassiopeia is related to the planet Saturn, which
Mm-hmm,
is associated with depression or melancholia,
mm-hmm,
and Venus, which is, of course, associated with sex. And
mm-hmm.
Saturn is, as a image of melancholia, Saturn could also be viewed as a kind of sign of lust. But, like, it's associated, the Cassiopeia is associated with the Hebrew letter Beth, which is the first letter of the both the Jewish and the Christian Bibles,
Yeah.
and the second tarot card, the High Priestess. So like when the women are drawing the cart, like I don't know where Sarah Borginnis is. Is she in the cart with James Robert? I don't
Oh.
know where she is. But you get this passage where the cart is being pulled by the women down to the river, and Toadvine and the kid, they have to get out of the way, right?
Mm, hmm.
So does Toadvine go on one side of the road and the kid on the other?
I'm so
Because
glad you just mentioned that.
if so, then for that microsecond that you
Mm-hmm,
mentioned
mm-hmm,
before, you might have this image of like two male figures or
mm-hmm,
pillars flanked
mm-hmm.
by, or sort of flanking Sarah Borginnis as the high priestess or something like that. Anyways, so like Tumbril has this kind of power to, resonate across the chapter and across the novel, and like hook up with all the other resonating
Mm,
uh, images of carts and stuff like that. And of course, like the cart is burned, right? Like they
mm-hmm.
burn the idiot's cart, right? And you know that could be a prefiguration of, again, Glanton's own end, right? Like Clanton, spoiler alert to, I'm sure every listener of this podcast has read the novel like before.
Oh, sure.
Clanton is about to die,
Yes.
everybody. Uh,
Yes.
so like, and his body will be heaped upon you know, um, a bonfire and burned or something like that. So we
Mhm.
have the burning of the card, the burn, like that is also maybe kind of prefiguring what's about to happen as well.
I love it. You've made me think of a couple of things. I just love it. I'm so glad you mentioned Toadvine and the Kid because they're in my notes too. Um, One, the joke that we're laughing about anachronism, this whole novel is an anachronism in its own right by being written in 1985 in the style of another era. And then when you go and look at these words that are they're not they're in so much of this is about you going and reading and finding out the word, and some of them are archaic. Much of the words are archaic. So that is another anachronism, actually. We don't even use this language. And you reminded me of Northrop Frye, who I
It's
do love.
anachronism in reverse, right? Because
And in
it's the past
reverse, thank you.
for the
Yes,
present rather the
correct. Correct. Which counts, which is sort of what Indigo Jones was doing, right?
maybe you
But
could call it like rather than anachronism, catachronism.
there you go. I love that.
Kata is
I
the
love
opposite.
that. Well, yeah, a couple of things occurred.
Catachronism.
Yeah. Oh,
Just
something
as
else occurred to
better.
me when you mentioned Northrop Frye is another critic. He says a great writer creates his audience. And certainly of any writer, Cormac has created their audience. And Joyce did too, and Thomas Pynchon. There's just some writers who create their audience, and he certainly has. And Blood Meridian is such a good example of it. And there's something kind of weird in this chapter and charming when you mention the kid and Toadvine. It's weird, it's meta in a way because that's like the reader. All of a sudden we have a chorus in this chapter. We've got them wondering what the heck's going on. And it kind of explains the judge and this whole improvement thing too, because they can't really let Sarah Borginnis win because it defeats the whole hierarchy they have in the gang of being part of it. And you did mention it a few minutes ago, but I love Toadvine and the Kid. I feel like they're like us, like on our podcast, going, "What's going on and what's happening?" And I feel like they're like the old guys on the Muppets, right? They're like, "What happened?" It's Greek.
All those guys.
Yeah, the Greek chorus. They're just sitting there, and they must be going, "How could she talk back to these guys? Are mindless killers?" And she's saying, "Oh, you can't do that." Uh, it's hilarious. And in that way, it is good that it's Sarah because she was forceful and she would be the kind of woman that would have done that, probably. So I just love that. The other thing is, artists
Yeah, it
also,
really deflates, the kind of mystique that the novel has made of the gang, like that these are like, gods passing judgment on the world, and they have a hive mind, it's all this very rhetoric of praise like throughout. But I guess like again, this is why like a realistic rewriting of this scene would be funny. And like
yeah,
Lucia Claire Robson could do it because she wrote a great novel of Sarah Bowman, right? But like in that camp, they would have just been, oh, they're those assholes, like they wouldn't be like the center of attention. It would just be another group at that crossing,
yeah,
like
yeah, totally. Uh, excuse me. Yeah, totally. And the thing is, I just one more back to anachronism too is that Shakespeare had that there's a reason, Elizabethan philosophy, they believed that poetry and their artifacts they were creating, they wanted them to be triumphal and monumental. And their hidden architecture, their hidden compositions and meanings were only meant not for the general audience, they were meant for other poets and other creatives. And that when you're trained in that, you're going to recognize that stuff. But it also means that they were made to go into the future. The reason they wanted them monumental was to go into the future. And great art is a time traveling artifact. And I think that that's what we're witnessing with some of the symbolism too. That, and the way that this novel is constructed is it was made to be a monument. It's made to travel into the future.
I think so, yeah. I mean, hey, speaking of Suttree, like there's
Mm.
that moment when Suttree, recants the vanity of his wanting to stand a stone with his name on it in the void or something like that. But
Mm,
this is that too. But
yeah,
this is kind of like monument, remember me.
yeah,
Or it could be like not even remember me, but I don't know, it's sort of like the like Chaco Canyon and the
yeah.
Anasazi ruins or whatever. Like
Hmm.
how does this past artifact relate to us in the present?
Yeah,
How do we relate to it?
yeah, definitely. Definitely. Well, we certainly talked a lot about a very short chapter.
Yeah, and one last sort of
Yeah,
mention of
please keep
art.
going.
I'm doing some work on like I guess the courtly love tradition, and especially the way the modernists have took it up and almost invented it, right? Because courtly love wasn't a term until like the late 19th century when this French medievalist sort of coined it, right? But then his students were also in England and they influenced the modernists. Like T.S. Eliot writes about how Jesse Weston's book on the Holy Grail narratives influenced the Wasteland. Weston
Mm,
was a student of Gaston Paris and stuff like that. But anyways, like the cart is also another. It's also an image from medieval courtly love literature, right? Like there's the famous poem by Chrétien de Troyes, Lancelot, the Knight of the Cart, right? And Lancelot has to go on the cart, or to be transported on a cart is like the utmost form of humiliation for a knight, right? But he does it for the sake of his lady or whatever. So, but the traveling on a cart is also a kind of like form of humiliation or
mm,
shaming or something like that. So, I do feel like well, somehow the courtly love tradition is wrapped up in Blood Meridian. Like Blood Meridian itself comes from a poem by Byron, which is about,
yeah.
a love poem that is kind of written in the spirit of courtly love. But courtly love is also like, or I guess that, you could say that around the 12th century, uh, gender was created or something like that.
Yeah,
Courtly love
that's
is
actually
also
true.
very much about gender essentialism, right?
Yeah.
Like women are women first and people second. Whereas,
Mhm.
like somebody like C.S. Lewis, who wrote The Allegory of Love about the courtly love tradition,
Mm.
say like Nordic literature, you'd look at, I don't know, Icelandic sagas and women are just people, right? Like they're people first. And so like, but the woman as this idea or ideal that Simone de Beauvoir talks about, and, like that has contained real living women in this idea for centuries, like it kind of comes out of the courtly love tradition. And like there is no heterosexual love in this novel at all,
Mm.
although it's written under the sign of it, right? If
Mm.
McCarthy is writing Blood Meridian while engaged in, the thing that he shouldn't have been engaged with, that
Oh,
relationship,
wow. Yeah.
right? Like there's a kind
We're
of,
referring to the Vanity Fair scandal.
yeah. I mean, so, you know, I think it was, did I say this, or have I sort of thought about this since
I think we're
our
way past worrying about repeating ourselves.
chapter
I know.
17?
I know
But
I
like,
am.
people like critics have thought that in a way the Border trilogy represents a certain kind of break from everything that came
Mm,
before.
mm,
Like
mm,
on the one hand, Blood Meridian is a Western, but on the other hand, the Border trilogy has sort of like significant elements of heterosexual romance in it that make it quite different. It's more popular, right? Like it was with All the Pretty Horses that McCarthy kind of broke through to commercial success.
mm,
And, some critics, attribute that to,
mhm,
the fact that he's using heterosexual romance and the popular figure of the cowboy. The cowboy is in Blood Meridian, but there's no heterosexual romance, right? But nonetheless, I would still argue that, McCarthy himself has sort of said like his, the core of literature is tragedy,
mm,
and that, one thing Cormac McCarthy will never be as great as Shakespeare because
mm,
he wrote a comedy. Like there's
mhm,
lots of humor in his books, but
Mm.
he's basically stuck in the tragic mode, like, or
True.
stuck maybe is a petty sort of word or whatever, but he only wrote in
Mm.
the tragic mode, kind of, right? Like,
Yeah, you're right.
so, like, if you look at Aristotle and the way he conceives of the four types of tragedy in poetics,
Mhm.
the one type is the type that Aristotle loved the most was the complex
Mm.
tragedy with reversal and recognition, right? So, the tragedy of Oedipus the king,
Mm.
like, there's Oedipus suddenly recognizes, oh my God, I really did marry my mother and kill my father. My children are my siblings, like
Yeah.
moment of, that it also allows for tragic irony, right? Like, we as the spectators of the tragedy know that Oedipus did all this, and we're waiting to see how he recognizes that.
Right.
Aristotle also listed other types of tragedies, and one of them is the tragedy of passion, which is just like it's a simple, straightforward. There's no reversals, there's no recognitions, and I feel like, am I right in saying that there are no reversals or recognitions in any of McCarthy's novels, that they're
Ooh.
just kind of straight ahead, no dramatic irony? The reader doesn't know more than the characters ever, or not
Yeah,
much.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, it's
Uh,
such a great observation.
but if you look at, Blood Meridian is one way that they connect Blood Meridian and then the Border trilogy is that they are tragedies of passion, right? It is passion that is the thing that drives the narrative toward its tragic conclusions. And in the case of Blood Meridian, it's the passion of the homosocial passion of, like, wrath or warfare,
Mhm.
the love of killing and
Mhm.
dominating and stuff like that. Whereas, in the Border trilogy, the tragedy is, sexual passion.
Mm.
John Grady's, like, tragedy with Alejandra and then Magdalena, and maybe Billy's homosexual tragedy
Mm.
of not having his love reciprocated by figures like John Grady or something like
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
Anyways, like,
Mhm.
passion, Blood Meridian is a tragedy of passion. Maybe Sarah Borginnis appears desexualized because she can't, or, you can't have two types of passion in the same novel. You can have heterosexual passion and the homoerotic passion for,
Mm.
or the homosocial passion for killing or for warfare or whatever.
Yeah,
You can't have those two, and you have to treat one at a time. So
which would
I
go
just
back to
find it,
Shane. Would go back to the end of Shane. It would kind
right.
of
Yeah.
reference that too. Yeah, you're
So, I
right.
mean, like, if Sarah Borginnis was really the way she was, and it would be funny because Blood Meridian would, like, turn into a comedy or something. Like, the kid would move to the American house in Saltillo, and,
Right.
he's the bartender at, or, like, something like that.
Right. Right.
Like, it would be, like, she would, like, if she were to be let loose as she was in the novel, she would, like,
Mm.
change the novel. It would no longer be the tragedy of passion that it is, or.
Right. Right. That's such a good point. Such a good point. You
The
definitely
point.
brought a lot of attention to my mind about, I mean, honestly, the first couple times I read the novel, I'm just I really didn't go and look into her life or anything. I mean, certainly anytime a woman was in Blood Meridian, I was kind of excited. But I didn't really look into her that much, and it's really been great to find out about her a bit more. And pretty cool. Pretty darn cool.
Yeah, it's a strange chapter where nothing kind of happens, but it's also a definite pivot again toward, the end, like the next
Yes.
chapter.
Yeah, yeah. I'm
Is-
looking forward to the next chapter. That's for sure. And I think also, sorry for my coughing, just a bag of mess over here.
oh,
Um,
really?
thank you for listening to anybody out there, our listeners. We really appreciate it. You can write us and tell us what our mistakes. Obviously, GVH has fixed his one that he felt he had in 2 episodes ago, or chapter 17, but they might know some of the questions and answers or thoughts about it. We are sending out, if you write us an email, We got little gift packages for people. I've got to send one out to that great letter we had a while ago. I keep forgetting to do that. And you can email us. We've set our email address, and which is bloodmeridiannow@gmail.com. You can also find supplementary content on our Substack page, which is just free. You can pledge if you want, but it is free to read publicly. And we'd love to know you're out there looking and thinking about it.
Let's get reading.
Yeah, keep reading. Uh, Anything else? Are we forgetting anything?
I don't think so. I think we made, a fair amount out of the chapter, or,
Good.
or we talked about everything we wanted to
I
talk
think we
about.
did talk about everything we wanted to. And again,
But
thank you.
also probably we didn't. We probably
Well, I
didn't.
know because sometimes we go off and I publish the episode and then I'm like, damn, I meant to talk about this. But I do feel like we covered a lot today of my notes and your notes. And
Wait, I have one more.
good, good. Do it, do it.
So, like, yeah, like first she's introduced as a woman named Sarah Borginnis. Then she's
Yes,
introduced
yes,
as the Borginnis woman.
yes.
Then it's the Borginnis woman. Then it's the Borginnis, right? Like it's this kind of like
Mm,
truncating
mm,
description. But I mean, she was called the Great Western, right? The Great
yeah.
Western. She was named after like the biggest British steamship, you know, in 1840 or whatever, right? So she accrues nicknames to herself. But yeah, I guess I kind of wanted to talk about maybe again. So why does McCarthy include Sarah Borginnis in this
Hmm.
novel?
Hmm.
I mean, she was the Great Western, and he's writing the Great Western. I don't know, like maybe
Good
there's
one. Good one. That makes so much sense. It makes so much sense. And it may not be all like just to dismiss the woman caregiving and her caring for James Robert. That was also a cusp of how he took care of mental health, and definitely there could be a clue here that he is interested in mental health, because he has some issues in some of his novels about depression and suicide. So this could be just that, here's this poor fellow. How do they survive? He may have also really wanted to have something like these guys are at, they might not be now, but they were at the height of their physical game. They're like the West Wing of evil. They know the best of their job. They know how to do it. They're out there. They're exceptional American exceptionalism in their own weird way of killing. Maybe not building the railroad, right? She is a good juxtaposition out there, you
she
know.
is,
She is.
and this was fun, and we should somehow come back to Sarah Borginnis.
We should. I think we will. And I'd also love to know who would be playing her in a movie. And I hope they would include her in the movie. Um, if it ever gets made, we're still waiting to hear.
That's
Um,
true.
yeah. Maybe we'll hear some news soon. It's been great talking to you. I hope everyone
You
has
too,
a
Candy. I
great
hope you
rest
feel
of their
better soon.
summer.
Sorry to hear about your back.
Yeah, I know. It's so ridiculous. It's getting better every couple of days, so that's good. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your summer and stay in touch. And again, everybody, please email us. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll bring out episodes in a more regular fashion, but probably not. But in any case, we do appreciate your patience and um,
Yes,
all
yes,
that. We do love doing this.
we do. It's so much fun. Just
All right.